The Incredibles was the first time Pixar ever told a human story. The film was the passion project of the director Brad Bird, who wanted to make the film years prior. It's safe to say that his passion for the project really bled into the film's quality, as The Incredibles is still one of the most unique, inventive, and bold Pixar films to this day. However, the development of the project was very long and ambitious, with many ideas and concepts that never made it into the final film, including a very dark moment and the original villain that was cut pretty far into development. The Incredibles was originally envisioned as a cel-animated 2D movie from Brad Bird, set to be developed by Warner Brothers. Brad worked on the idea for a while, potentially since 1993. However, when The Iron Giant flopped at the box office, Warner Brothers would shut down their animation division, leading Brad Bird to take the idea to a different studio, which happened to be Disney. There is little indication on what the 2D animated style of The Incredibles would have been. It could have been an animated version of the 2D concept art while utilizing the mid-century modernism style we see utilized in the film and its promo material. Speaking of the conceptual artwork, it's interesting to see how the characters and the various visual elements of the movie evolved over time. Elements like the design of the Omnidroids reflect just how diverse the various styles and vision for the film were like. The Omnidroid itself always maintained a very similar design language, a roundish multi-legged robot with flexible arms. However, some concepts for the Omnidroid were a bit more unique, such as this one, where it appeared more similar to a scorpion. Characters like Elastigirl and Mr. Incredible went through various concepts early in development, with the creative team playing around with the costumes and the overall look of the characters. When you take a look at some of the artwork, you'll notice that many of the characters' suits were still blue by this point in development, like Dash and Mr. Incredible, meaning that the intention wasn't always to give them all red suits in the end. What I find the most interesting in the conceptual work is the time period, as clearly there was way more of an emphasis on the 1960s aesthetic. The conceptual artwork also shows off the more dark elements of the story, those in which they couldn't fully delve into in the final film. Now, when The Incredibles really got going in terms of its development, there were many ideas that were present in some iterations of the movie that would end up being cut from the final project. Based on the stage of development, however, the scenes that were cut were either completely story-altering or were just scenes that gave additional context to a moment, such as a scene where we see the character Rick erase the memory of Bob's boss, or a scene where Mr. Incredible helps the police stop a criminal only to be met with aggression for his attempted heroism.
Police business, sir. Please return to your vehicle.
Hey, I'm just here to help. I don't mean to...
Return to your vehicle, sir. Now.
Hey, listen, buddy.
However, it's the more significant story-altering scenes that are really the most interesting to discuss. The Incredibles at its heart is a superhero story that mixes the mundane and the fantastical together to create a unique viewing experience we've never seen before. I think it's the reason why I've connected so much with the movie as a kid, and why it's still my favorite Pixar film ever made. It's very surreal seeing these fantastical characters live through these ordinary lives, and how that life of complacency feeds into the very compelling drama of the story. While this drama is done very well in the final movie, there were certain elements present in the alternative pitch of the story that paint a completely different picture for the characters and the overall narrative.
I love the idea of a superhero defending, being a mom. Yeah. So I like that moment, and I'm sorry that we don't have something like that in the movie.
In the alternate pitch of the movie, The Incredibles opens with an overview of the world we live in. The scene featured Helen and Bob attending a neighborhood party. They had just moved into the area and were introducing themselves to their neighbors. In the original film, we know that Bob, Helen, and the whole family are relocated on a constant basis, so seeing them move into this neighborhood does make sense in the plot. This scene serves to develop Helen's character, showing how much she values raising her children.
You consider raising a family nothing?
Well, it's fine if you're not suited for more
substantial things.
However, the scene is also very comedic as Bob is caught cutting his fingers off and has to pretend he's in pain to avoid suspicion. However, despite the comedic nature of this scene, The Incredibles was still very much a dark narrative, a fact that is proven to the viewer in this next alternate scene.
Honey,
I heard it.
a burglar?
I don't know.
In this moment, Mr. Incredible and Elastigirl hear the sound of their window breaking. It seems someone has decided to rob them, and they of course must confront the intruder. There's a strange mundaneness to this scene, like hearing someone breaking in is not all that shocking. This does mean that they've experienced this before, and it also indicates that the last time it happened, Mr. Incredible went a little too far with his confrontation.
Don't break anything, okay? I just got the house organized.
All right already. I'm gonna try to enjoy this anyway.
As Mr. Incredible meets this would-be robber, we find out in a shocking moment that this is not a robber, but the villain, Syndrome. From what we can understand, it seems Syndrome was a villain Mr. Incredible fought in the past, defeating him and sending him to jail.
Cool, huh? Little something I was working on when you sent me to the Skookum House!
In this moment, Syndrome has come to Mr. Incredible's home to take revenge, and I gotta say, the scene is tense and very well executed. There's a clear history in this moment that we ourselves as viewers have never seen, an element of the story that's not really present in the original movie. As we know, in the original film, Syndrome is someone who idolized Mr. Incredible. Their dismissal for their help leads them down a path of resentment, now wanting to prove that you don't need the acknowledgement of your heroes to be worth anything.
I'll sell my invention so that everyone can be superheroes. Everyone can be super.
You didn't really think that getting a new life would absolve you of the last one, did you? You had to know I'd be back to settle accounts.
However, in this version, Jess seems to be one of the many villains Mr. Incredible has fought, who only recently discovered his true identity. It seems that in this version of the film, Mr. Incredible did not retire from being a hero forcefully. At least by this point, it seems he only stopped being a hero just recently instead of years ago, like in the final film. Here, it seems it was a decision he made with his wife to live a normal life. However, based on dialogue, it doesn't seem like Mr. Incredible was fully supportive of the choice.
Well, we wanted a normal life.
Did we?
It does mean that the central conflict of the movie can still revolve around Mr. Incredible missing his life as a hero, and perhaps he can still do hero work in secret behind his wife's back. This does also mean that the overall story of the heroes being banned from operating did not exist in this iteration of the film. Another interesting plot element worth mentioning is the presence of their 3 kids. It seems Dash, Violet, and Jack did not exist in this iteration of the film. Instead, they only have one child who in the animated storyboard seems to have the ability to turn invisible, similar to Violet. So in a way, this does mean that this iteration of The Incredibles is less of a family ensemble and more of a wife and husband story, where their baby would be the main emotional crux of the whole story. Now back to Syndrome. Design and personality-wise, he's pretty identical to his film counterpart, besides the fact that he's notably taller. In fact, he's so alike to his film version that he even repeats a line we see him say in the final film.
And had a kid? It's a whole family of supers! Looks like I've hit the jackpot!
And got busy! It's a whole family of supers! Looks like I've hit the jackpot!
However, did you know that Syndrome in this storyboard was never intended to be the main villain of the story? No, at least here, he seemed more like a one-off antagonist. In fact, the main villain of the movie, originally pitched by Brad Bird, was completely different. You see, before Syndrome was chosen as the main antagonist of The Incredibles, there used to be a different villain entirely. The character was named Zarek, and there's not much we know about his character. Concept art of the character dates back all the way to 1998, and here we see that Zarek has quite a strange appearance with a weird short and green body. As later conceptual artworks would show, this idea would shift to a more human-looking appearance. Zarek now takes on this tall, lanky, and suave-like look with a large beard. Clearly, Zarek is an older man, someone who comes from money, and based on the little concepts we can gauge of him, he seems to be someone who's cold and calculating, but also charismatic. He feels like someone you'd see in a classic spy film, and he's seemingly someone who's a hyper genius based on the high-tech technology seen around him. Based on what we know as well, clearly he has some kind of romantic relationship with the character Mirage, who was also present in the original pitch. Clearly based on the concept art as well, the broad strokes of the Incredibles story were still present at this point, such as Bob being captured by the villains and locked up within some kind of device. Zarek clearly also owns a scientific island filled with his own guards who also changed a lot during the film's development. Zarek was a part of the film for quite a while. We know this due to a clay sculpture of the character that depicts him in his very final design. We know this for sure due to the other clay sculpts that were made around the same time, which depict the final designs of all the characters. So why was Zarek cut in favor of Syndrome? Well, after the home invasion animatic was completed, many of the creatives and producers loved Syndrome's character. They felt he was very compelling, sinister, and fun to watch, clearly much more than they felt about Zarek. Because Syndrome was so much more enjoyable, he was chosen as Zarek's replacement, and many aspects of Zarek's character were given to Syndrome instead, like the private technological island, his assistant Mirage, and his seemingly romantic relationship with her, and his wealth. Zarek, however, would not go completely unused, as he was featured as the villain of the Incredibles comic. However, it's important to know that Zarek here in no way reflects Brad Bird's original vision or intention for the character, so it's better to imagine comic Zarek as an original character with a similar name and slightly similar narrative role.
You know why we can't do that.
Because it'd be great!
It's not about you!
The family drama of The Incredibles is played into a lot in the original movie, but of course, to a more reserved degree. This was a family film after all, so there were certain ideas that couldn't really be embraced. One early idea delved into Elastigirl's suspicion regarding Bob and his supposed business trip. In fact, in this alternative scene, Elastigirl actually believes that Bob is cheating on her and leaves in secret to be with his mistress.
Are you having an affair?
Yeah, me and the old lady. One look at her laundry and I had to have her. Are you nuts?
This leads to a pretty emotional and tense moment where she confronts him and they engage in a heated argument. This scene was bold for a children's movie, and thus it's likely why they never used it in the final film, though an element of this original premise is still present in the film in the form of a hair on Bob's suit. There was another scene leaning into Helen's anxiety regarding Bob's commitment to their marriage. In this sequence, Helen has a dream where Bob is surrounded by many women. Helen tries to confront him, but her dream prevents her from getting close. Clearly, this plot element of Helen's anxiety was pretty prevalent early in the film, but was simplified by the final version of the movie. It's no question that The Incredibles is quite a dark film in Pixar's lineup, exploring many complex elements regarding the loss of one's dream, infidelity, self-confidence, and even death. In fact, one deleted scene really leaned into this final part. In an unused sequence, Helen calls up an old friend named Snug, who according to Brad Bird, was an individual who flew different heroes to different parts of the world. Anyways, Helen gets Snug to fly her to the remote island where Bob is being kept. On the plane, Helen and Snug discussed her strained marriage and what she intends to do about it. As the scene continues, the characters realize that something is wrong. Missiles have been fired towards their jet, and Snug must now desperately evade the missiles. However, eventually their luck runs out and the plane is hit. Helen and the kids survive. However, Snug is seemingly killed and drops into the bottom of the ocean. This, by far, would have served as the darkest moment Pixar has ever depicted in their films. You see a genuine sense of mortal fear from Snug as the missiles approach. It's a visceral kind of human reaction you'd never expect to see from a children's film. Now you'd think that this scene was cut because of how dark it was. However, the scene was actually cut to save up on time. Brad Bird decided that Snug's character was pretty unnecessary to the plot, so when he was cut from the story, it meant the plane sequence had to be altered as well. Now Helen was the pilot, and Snug is only present through a photo and a phone call. Now the scene of Helen watching the plane sink to the bottom of the ocean is the only scene maintained in the final film. The Incredibles is a fantastic film, one that will stand the test of time. In fact, I love the movie so much that I've refused to see the second one to this day. The film represented what happens when creatives take risks and experiment on a popular concept and are willing to compromise on ideas they loved very early on.